The Money Show is brought to you by Old Mutual. Get great financial advice. Old Mutual is a licensed financial services provider. It's 7:07. It is July, and lots of you, most recently, Bridget, at an event that I was at the other day, came up to me and said, when's Julia? Where is Julia? You have not had Julia on this year. I demand to have Julia. And I said, well, why? He said, because I use her to teach my students. And I said, but what do you... And she, no, everyone's so inspired. And I've heard so many stories over the last 5 or 6 years, since we've been talking to Julia once a year about her remarkable saving stories and how she has fundamentally changed the way many of you think about investing and made you realize what is possible, made you realize that if you don't get started, you are going to get left behind. And if you get left behind, the consequences for your old age are disastrous. So for McDonald, who wants to buy a car rather than invest more, if we've got time, Warren, we'll assess McDonald's very well argued. This is why I'm going to buy another car, because my wife will really like it and I'll be popular. SMS this evening. But Julia, I'm going to summarize very quickly, because Julia came to us about 5 years ago. She'd been investing at that point for about 5 years. She'd started at the tender age of 27. Now you know how old she is. And she had 60,000 Rand in cash, and she wanted to invest it. She had 5,000 Rand a month. She was able to add to those investments. And she spoke to her aunt on a road trip back from Durban, I think it was, and said to her aunt, why are you not like my mom and dad? Why do you have this cool life? And they just work all the time. And you just live the life of Riley. And she said, well, because I know this guy called Warren, and he solved my problems. And you should talk to him. And so she went and spoke to Warren. And Warren said, how much money are you prepared to put in the market? And she said, I don't know. He said, how about all of it? She went, no. He went, yes. No. And the timing was impeccable. It was just before the financial crisis. So Warren chucks all her money into the market. The financial crisis comes. She has a heart attack, a small one, not a real medical emergency. But she goes, this guy's crazy. But what does she do? She carries on investing. And what Julia has done over the last 10 years is nothing short of extraordinary, because what she's been able to do is ride the considerable growth of the market from the collapse of markets in 2008 all the way to levels which are currently at or about record levels and have been going pretty much sideways for the last 3 years. The last 3 years, her performance hasn't looked fantastic. But the big secret has been she's added virtually a quarter of everything she's earned for most of the last 10 years, and a quarter to a third, every single year into index products. And everything else, Warren Ingram, because you use the Julia example in your How to Make Your First Million book, or Make Your First Million book, in which she is a case study.
The very best case study, in fact. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're talking about the stock market over the last 3 years. It's given us a handsome return of just on about 3.5% a year for the last 3 years. So to keep accumulating capital in a time like that, it takes patience, it takes guts, it takes a bit of foresight, and just sheer bloody mindedness sometimes.
Now, Julia, when you look back to the amount of money that she had invested in July 2009, she'd already been invested for a little while, and she'd been through the dip of the financial crisis. She was sitting on, call it, under 400,000 Rand. Today, she's worth 10 times that. And that is testament to adding money into the market every single year and seeing the growth in the market.
So over that time, Julia's accumulated, we worked it out before coming on air, 67% of what growth. So she's put in less than half of what she has today. And that's the power of the compounding now. That's
the most important lesson. Park that thought, the power of compounding, because I want to come back to it, and I think we need to wrap up on that, because you need to understand the context. Let's talk to Julia. You're back.
I'm back.
Now, when we last saw you, you had a toddler.
That's right.
And your toddler is now a bigger toddler. Your husband was still driving the Opel Corsa Light that by then was about 10 years old. You'd made the fatal mistake that people who have children make, in that you'd decided to go from the 2-bedroom flat which you'd been renting. You then had to buy a home, because you can't let your child grow up in a home that you don't own. So you make the fatal parent's mistake, and you get a bigger car and you get a bigger house. And then you buy a house that you can afford, and then you invest lots of money renovating it. Exactly. You fell for every single trap for such a sensible person.
Well, I didn't intentionally fall into these traps, but as you say, it's kind of a natural progression. And I was actually saying to Warren before, in some ways I long for those easy, stress-free days of living in the 2-bedroom rental accommodation where you didn't have to worry about if the geyser burst, the landlord would figure all of that out. And so, yeah, we are not in that situation at all anymore. The cost of maintaining a house is exponentially more than renting, and the cost of having a child, nanny, play school, all of these kinds of things, your fixed costs just go up.
And they grow, and they demand new clothes, and they eat. And if you don't feed them, they get cross.
Exactly.
It's very unreasonable, these young people of today.
And you have to take them on holiday, which is increasing our airfare bill quite a lot. So.
Because also, up until the age of 2, you can take kids on. And because what you were doing at the peak of your savings prowess is you were still traveling, you were still going out to restaurants regularly, you were still traveling overseas up to twice a year.
Yeah.
And you were still living the life of Riley. Have you maintained, broadly speaking, your lifestyle with having a child?
I would say yes, and I think we're rethinking that, especially the overseas travel, because of the significant additional amount that it costs. We're thinking that we have to spend at least a couple of years just in South Africa doing local holidays now, because it's just becoming unaffordable to travel with 3 of us overseas every year. 4 soon, yeah.
Yes.
4 soon. So then that will become...
You didn't learn the lesson the first time. No, so you're doing it again. And that's going to also put a new dynamic, a new spin onto the dynamic of your ability to invest. Because your husband's working, you're working.
Yeah.
You've not given up on work. You've gone back to work, and that comes with the income, which is great. But it also has additional costs because you've got to hire help in order to make that possible.
No, indeed. It was definitely a conscious decision to go back to work. I like working, but as you say, then that comes with a fixed cost of a nanny at 5,000 Rand a month, and schooling and transportation for the child. So, it's what I really would say, sitting where I am now, if I look back, to people who have the opportunity to save and invest before they have kids. It's the best time to do it.
But that's the big lesson I want to take out of tonight, because what you did was absolutely right. You started at the age of 27. You had a good 7 or 8 years of big investing in terms of a proportion of your salary. Between 25 and 35% of your monthly salary you were putting into investments, into index funds. And that is the power, Warren Ingram, of starting early.
The absolute head start now, because if you can get to the point where when you have your children, you don't have to draw on that capital, even if you can't really add too much to it, but if you can let it maintain itself and grow, and you use your lifestyle, you cover your lifestyle costs with your salary, I think that puts you far ahead of most people. Julia's been able to kind of compromise, I guess, and sometimes add to savings, and for some instances not, but never had to be in a situation where she had to draw from her capital, and now that capital just grows and grows on itself the whole time, and to the point where possibly it will be this year or possibly next year, the growth will be more than what she would need to cover her lifestyle costs if she decided to draw.
Explain that.
Won't. So let's just say that it's sitting on a position of 4.2, and the market gives us a normal year. We haven't had a normal year in quite some time, and a normal year would be 15%. So suddenly you're sitting in a position where your growth might be 500,000, 600,000 Rand in a year. And if you said, okay, I don't want to touch my capital, I just want to live off the growth, you're getting closer and closer. So it doesn't take long now for Julia to be in a position where she can take, let's say, half of her growth on an annual basis as an income to cover her lifestyle costs, and the other half continues to compound on itself. And that all starts because she started so early.
And the beauty of what you've done, Julia, is that you do respond to Julia still. Excellent. That's not her real name, by the way. Is that you've done the hard yards, you've done the investing. You've not added anything to your investments in the last 6 months. Can I ask why?
So, these investments that I put here are only the investments in the JSE. So what we decided to do was to pay off the bond. So we've put in between my husband
Getting rid of
and
debt, which is good, Warren. Tick.
Yeah.
Good.
So put a lot into the bond, and because I'm married to a foreign national, we've also taken money offshore. So investing in index tracker funds, but offshore in France. So we've done that with our savings this year, instead of putting it into the
JSE. Okay, again, that's what you're entitled to do. It's good to diversify. I mean, in your portfolio, you've got various DBX global trackers, the Euro 50, DBX World, and then in there you've got Satrix 40, Satrix Finis, Satrix RAFI as well. You've got a good array. And what I really like about what you did was you didn't get clever. You got very clever, genius, but you didn't play any fancy tricks. You weren't doing anything particularly cerebral. You weren't trying to find the best hedge fund manager. You weren't chasing the best returns, last year's best returns, and throwing money at genius fund managers who did brilliantly last year, maybe very good, but might not do as well as next year. You did basic stuff.
Exactly. I honestly spend about 30 minutes a month thinking about this. I don't try and overthink it. I just take the discipline and where we've got savings, invest it. So we changed our strategy a bit this year in terms of the house and offshore, but it wasn't through overthinking. It was just...
Now's the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of something like an index tracker. You don't have to look at financial statements of all the top companies on the JSE to decide who...
You don't need to understand.
Yeah.
Really what is going on within individual companies. You don't have to worry about the corporate politics of company A versus company B. You don't have to worry about that because the index kind of takes care of all of that noise for you.
Exactly. And the other thing that I've done is I haven't sold any shares. Often when I speak to friends and colleagues, there's this idea that you have to sell the share to get to obtain the profit. But if you can just discipline yourself enough to just put the money in and wait for it to grow, that's really the best thing you can do, rather than try and be clever about, okay, I bought it at this price, now the time is right to sell it. If you just do the simple stuff and you do it early enough, that's really what will make the difference.
How often do you look at your investments? You say you spend half an hour a month thinking about stuff. Do you look at them daily?
No.
Weekly? Monthly?
Potentially monthly, and if something happens, like anything in the financial news that happens, I might take a look to see what's happened, because I still invest with a tax-free investment account, which isn't here, but that I've got some money that I still need to invest. So potentially something happens, and or I listen to 702 and I hear what the price of the euro is, and maybe decide to send money offshore or not. So it's not.
But that's also one of the secrets, Warren, in terms of not chasing the noise and being able to step back from it. It was a great presentation today, and with a guy who was just saying, you know what, if you were showing us a year graph on the JSE and say, if you look at the JSE every single day and you see this zigzagging volatility and craziness, if you look at it on a monthly basis, there's a zig and a zag. You look at it annually, and there's an up and a down and a recovery. Yeah. And the less you get emotionally involved in these investments, the better.
Well, I mean, that's what's so interesting. We've got it in front of us, and unfortunately we can't show it on air. But the graph of Julia's money and how it's grown, and talking about that 2008, the financial crisis, and you look at it now, and it just looks like a reasonably small little dip. It doesn't look like this massive event, which it was. And that's the sheer value of leaving your investments over time. So you're 100% right. Is the big news events that were shaking our world, once you give it the benefit of time and you look at it again with a little bit of a rearview mirror, you start to realize it just wasn't such a big event if you did nothing.
I want to simplify this a lot and to say, on average, you've probably added about 300,000 Rand a year to your investments. It was about a third of everything you were earning at the point that you were adding actively into your investments. So in July 2009, Julia had 382,000 Rand in her investments. She added some that year. She added that year only 158,000. She was earning less in those days. But, the money doubled in value by July 2010. And then it went from 750,000 to 1.1 million. And a year later, it was at 1.5 million. And she'd added some capital there. There was a big jump to 2 million. And then the huge jump in July 2013 to July 2014. In that year, she added just 335,000 Rand. And the amount of money that she had invested, because markets went mad, went from 2 to over 3 million. And that's the power of growth and being patient and not doing fancy footwork. More with Julia and with Warren in just a moment. A couple of questions coming through. Matthew in Randburg at 23, Mark in Bedford View at 43. Two different questions on strategy coming up in a moment.
The Money Show. Personal finance.
Matthew in Randburg, age 23. Your question, Matthew.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for taking my call. Just a quick question. I'm 23 years old and I have a bit of money kept aside and I'm not really sure where to put it at the moment. My knowledge on everything financial is very basic. I just want to know, what would you guys advise at the way the economy is now? Where should I put my money?
Okay, Matthew, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask Julia to answer that question. Matthew in Randburg. The first thing I'm going to say to you, Matthew, is go to your local bookshop and get Warren's book, Make Your First Million. That's the first thing. You take some of that money that you've got and you buy that book. And then you read it and you put it aside for a week and then you read it again. And then you do what Warren says in the book. But Julia.
I would just say do exactly what I did. So just take all your savings and put it into, I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this, but put it into the stock market and put it into index trackers and don't worry about what the market does. Just invest each month and after 10 years, phone Bruce and
tell him what you did.
Yeah.
And unless it's really bad and the world's gone to hell, and then don't, please. And don't remind us of this day. But I think if you have you made any mistakes? Not starting like Matthew 23.
Yeah, exactly. Starting a few years earlier would have been good. Not things that I couldn't recover from. So no, not yet. I haven't made mistakes yet.
Good, excellent. Now, the power of compounding, Warren Ingram. We can take those off. You look like you're singing "We Are the World." He's holding a pair of headphones to his ears, like Sting did in the music video of "We Are the World." The power of compounding. If Julia never invests another cent, because what Julia has done is she's invested a total of 2.5 million rand. That's the cash that she's invested over 10 years.
Yeah.
She's done incredibly well. The value of that money today is sitting at about 4.22 million rand. She has got 1.7 million rand. I don't want to say for nothing, but it is for nothing. For half an hour of thinking about it a month and making some smart choices, she's grown the value of her capital from 2.5 plus 1.7 for free money of growth to 4.22 million rand. If she never invests another cent, she's going to be super rich one day.
Well,
she'll be able to feed all the cats.
Yeah. So if the world normalizes, then I think it's just a matter of time now. Then you expect that money to double every 5 years. So it doesn't take long before we're sitting on 15, 20 million rand. It's not inconceivable that that's the case.
But the thing is, once you're sitting on 20 million rand, then the move from 20 to 30 million rand isn't that huge, and the move from 30 to 50 isn't all that huge, because that's the power of compounding. This thing is like a snowball, and once it goes, it gathers momentum and it picks up more value along the way in a normalized world.
And I think the very best book I've ever read about Warren Buffett is called Snowball for that reason.
Snowball, yeah.
And I think it's he really started to accumulate money sort of 20 years into his initial 40-year career. That was when he started to get on everybody's radar. So that's what we're talking about here, is a process that's 10 years in, and it's not diminishing the process at all. It's the hardest 10-year period is going to be the first 10 years, and after this it gets easier and easier and easier. I mean that's the beauty of this compounding effect.
John in Kells River, quick question from you, John.
Yes, hi.
Switch off your radio, John.
Find out from Julie if she can give me some ideas of some tax-free investments that I can make. Just like the previous caller said, he's got some money. I've also got some, and I don't know much about finances.
Okay, John, tax-free savings accounts. I'm going to pass that one over to you, Warren, because I think it's an unfair question for Julia.
Yeah.
Again, read the book. The rules are the same for the tax-free savings accounts as to how you choose them. And I hate the name because there are unit trust portfolios that you can invest in. There are
index trackers.
A whole bunch of things you can invest your money in as a tax-free savings account.
And I think that must be the starting point. And then the second one would be to contribute to your retirement fund. If you don't have a company retirement fund, contribute to a retirement annuity. obviously a good low-cost one, preferably one with index trackers. So I think the point there is if you're conscious of tax and tax in your life, then those are the two good ways to go. And I think it was an interesting point actually that Julia brought up was tax has suddenly become something that's on her radar now. Tax is now a material consideration when she makes investment decisions, which wouldn't have been the case 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's where the dividends tax, the capital gains, is etc. So it's good to be tax conscious, but it's not the reason to avoid investing.
But it's a nice problem to have, Julia, is it not?
No, it is
Exactly.
a nice problem.
A tax problem is better than no tax problem because it means you got some money.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's much better than a debt problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're still driving modest motor cars.
Correct.
You're pouring money into your bond. You've got child number 2 on the way. You are diversifying your investments and putting a little bit of money in euros in France, but into similar investment vehicles as you've got here.
Exactly.
You remain committed to the way forward to continue investing as you have in the past.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not about just accumulating wealth. I'm never going to be Warren Buffett with whatever billions he's got. But it's about, so for me, it's not about just the accumulation, but it's to be able to live a lifestyle that I want to, right? So that's, for me, a lot of the motivating factor is to be able to be financially independent so that I can choose where and how and what work I want to do.
If you want to work at all at some point in the future, you may want to do charity work. You may want to go bumming around the world for a year or two with your kids barefoot if you want to.
Yeah, so I might not accumulate money to the maximum that I can, but until the point that I can live an independent lifestyle, that's what I want to do.
It's all about financial independence. Julia, you're a superstar. Well done. Thank you. Lots of people wanted to have you back. We've got you back. The podcast is up. Share it with your friends. Inspire your friends. Get people to listen to the story. And the younger your friends are, the more they should listen to it, the more they should read Warren's book. Warren Ingram, thank you very much indeed. Warren Ingram from Galileo